No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 58. And to support this brand new independent news venture, please hit subscribe right now and turn on your notification bells. Now, Katie Hopkins has made an extraordinary plea to Nigel Farage to open up Reform UK to her for the good of Britain.
I would be at the Reform conference tomorrow if they would allow me to.
So is the party right to shut out some of the country's most popular figures who have defied cancel culture? I'll give my verdict in the digest next, and then top academic Dr. Philip Kiszely from the New Culture Forum weighs in. Also coming up on the show today, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper claims so-called rioters after the Southport Massacre were racist, while completely ignoring the significant threat of terror from Islamist extremism, while the loser Prime Minister fluffs his big line during a dire keynote in Liverpool.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages. Immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
And why is Prince Harry in New York spouting word salads even without Meghan Markle by his side?
Every single one of us need courage in order to really move the dial and create positive change in today's world, probably more so now than ever. So thank you to you guys for giving me and probably a lot of other people in this room hope. And now we need to listen, constantly listen, and then act on the advice and the vision that you have, because otherwise it's your future that's being stolen from you, and that is unacceptable.
Amazing. Thank you. Amazing.
Can't he just get a haircut and get a real job? Our Royal Mastermind Angela Levin will analyse later. Then in the uncancelled after show, more major news on the Royals, including new revelations. We're going to hear from the Duchess of Sussex about her so-called suicide attempt while in the royal family. You can register to watch on our own website right now, www.outspoken.live. You know it's a safe space, free of censorship, and your support at just £5 a month not only gives you 30 minutes of extra content every single weekday, it allows me to continue making this independent daily news show. Let's go. Katie Hopkins has made an extraordinary plea to Nigel Farage after the leader of Reform UK was accused of shutting out patriots who have been cancelled from the mainstream. Now, I think this raises a fundamental point about what Nigel wants reform to be. Is this a Donald Trump style movement aiming to smash the establishment and tear up the mainstream media, effectively reinventing politics in Britain to be by the people, for the people? Or does he simply intend to work within the system to destroy the Conservative Party? Unlike Tommy Robinson, who we're going to talk about shortly, Katie is actually pretty supportive of Nigel and reform, a bit like me, a critical friend. But she acknowledges she is unwelcome by the party.
I would be at the Reform conference tomorrow if they would allow me to speak. The second thing I'll say, having had the experience of all of my tours and 20 years on the road, is I would be the better speaker at the conference for them to have. Because I don't give a shit, I welcome everybody, and I represent a dynamic they don't have, which is ordinary bird who used to work at McDonald's and Woolworths and used to be a cleaner and is quite gobby. But the thing is, I'm not allowed there. I'm not allowed to be at the Reform conference. I'm not allowed to turn up at the conference. I'm not allowed to be seen at the conference, because Nigel and Reform need to toe a path that isn't associated with far right. Clearly, I know I'm not far right. But also, please know, if you support Reform, or maybe you're even at the conference, or maybe you're going to the conference, please know you have my absolute word that tomorrow, if I was given the opportunity to speak, I'll do the lunchtime slot. I'll do the after lunch slot. I'll do the slot that no one else is any good at. I would be there. I will drive in my car now and I will be there. So just so you know, that's my commitment to our side, right? I don't believe in the division. I understand what Nigel and Reform are doing, but please know they won't allow me anywhere near them. It's not because I won't be there.
Interesting, right? Now, of course, it's lunacy to suggest Katie is far right. Just like it's lunacy to say the same thing about me. We are simply former mainstream media veterans who were not prepared to be captured by the dangerous woke mind virus attempting to destroy the society we love. But think about this. If Donald Trump had excluded such supporters from the Republican Party, there'd be no Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Carrie Lake, or Steve Bannon, or Dan Bongino, or Tucker Carlson. So I'd argue there's an opportunity here, especially with the death of the MSM coming and the independent sector thriving, to shift the Overton window. So many of you were disappointed when Richard Tice made it clear to me on Friday after Reform's barnstorming conference that the party has no intention of doing that. Tommy Robinson hosted the Uniting the Kingdom March, and it was a very peaceful event, and lots of folk went, and actually lots of Reform UK supporters went. There was no trouble whatsoever. Are you saying that if you attended that Tommy Robinson Uniting the Kingdom march, or maybe posted on X in support of that march, that you would not be able to stand for Reform UK in the future?
I haven't said that, but we have a list of entities that if you've been a member of, then that would prevent you from being a member of Reform or Standing. We're very robust on that. We want nothing to do with Tommy Robinson, and we want to aim to be a credible challenger, to be the next governing party, and that requires bluntly a level of hard work, professionalism, and credibility that we've never seen before from from a party outside the main two. So that's where we are. That's what we're doing. That's where we're going, and we're not going to be hijacked by anybody.
Now, Tommy was very unhappy with that interview. He posted on X, having seen it, "I want nothing to do with Reform or Richard Tice either. I personally see yourself and Nigel Farage as nothing more than Tories in different coloured ribbons. The harassment of my supporters by Reform for simply supporting is what sickens me, alongside the constant trying to boogeyman me in attempts to paint yourselves in a better light, just like the establishment do. I wonder why. You're no better than the others. Yous don't care about our demographic replacement. You won't even mention the Islamification of the UK." But what he did do is endorse the brilliant Douglas Murray, who put things actually in quite a different complexion to Richard. Watch this.
The interesting thing that Tommy Robinson speaks to and has always spoken to is, what are you allowed to do about this or say about this? Now, if you're me, for the time being, you're allowed to write about it sometimes. You're allowed to speak about it sometimes. You're allowed to raise alarms sometimes. You're allowed to speak your mind somewhat. But if you're a Tommy Robinson character, if you grow up in Luton and you haven't had many advantages in life and you've had quite a lot of disadvantages and you're white and working class, what are you allowed to do about this? What are you allowed to say about any of this? And the government, for decades now, has had the attitude, you're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to say anything. You can't do anything, because if you do, we'll call you a racist and we'll call you far right.
So I think Douglas is certainly right in pointing out that there is a class issue here. It's ludicrous that only academics with big brains and beautiful words should be able to attack the failure of multiculturalism, invasion of our southern border, and peril of allowing extreme Islam to take over the country, including introducing Sharia law through the back door. Come on. The elite class are going to call you racist wreckers anyway. Think about it. It's like Emily Maitlis claiming Britain is broken because Nigel Farage broke it, a man who has never been in power. Or, today, Slippery Starmer yet again deriding and degrading those of us concerned about mass immigration in his Labour conference speech, where he failed to mention even once the threat of extreme Islam.
To say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different. I say, not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win because the British values we stand for, not just the rule of law, but a love for this country and our neighbours, the respect for difference under the same flag, that is stronger than bricks, and you know it. It's what you cannot stand about our country, our reasonable, tolerant country, but it's absolutely who we are.
Now, you know I am clear. I do not believe the answer to the destruction Britain is facing is on the streets. But I do believe our revolution can be achieved if we stay united. And I think that means understanding from both sides. Understanding that Nigel Farage has a very difficult job to do, given the pressure he is under, with the establishment, the elite class, the mainstream media trying to cancel him literally every single minute. But Nigel must also understand that there are many good, honest folk who feel completely let down by the system. To discuss this further, let me bring in today's outsider. And making his return to Outspoken today, I am so happy to be joined by one of the few voices of sanity in academia. Philip Kiszely is a cultural historian, author, political commentator, and a senior fellow at the brilliant New Culture Forum. Philip, I am so glad to have you here today. This is really interesting, isn't it? The divide in Reform UK. And I thought Katie Hopkins was incredibly reasonable. She's saying she does support Nigel, she does support reform, but she's wanting to make it clear to her supporters she would be there if she could. But for whatever reason, she feels like she's been rejected by the party. Where do you stand on this one?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And it feels as though, hello, Dan, by the way, it's lovely to see you.
Great to see you.
It feels as though we're at a kind of watershed moment for reform at the moment. And the things they do over the next few weeks are going to be really important. They're going to set out their stall, if you like, for the next 2 or 3 years. And if they don't gain and maintain confidence now from those grassroots people who are desperate to support them, they're going to find it very, very difficult to get it back in the ensuing months and years. I listened to what Katie said, and I thought it was completely reasonable. I think we need voices like Katie's, like Tommy Robinson's, because they are essentially the voices of the people. They say what they think. Yes, as you say, they don't talk in low, serious academic tones, but that's good. I think one of the things we really need to do is break the paradigm, get different kinds of people commentating and talking, not only in arenas like this and on television, but actually from within the political parties. Now, it's already happened. Don't forget Rod Liddle, who's pretty controversial himself, stood for SDP this time, and did reasonably okay. But I think if Katie Hopkins and Tommy Robinson, those two people in particular, if they were bought into the fold, okay, if they were, the word I'm looking for is trusted, okay, if they were trusted, then I think reform. They've gone on this massive journey. They've got, 4 MPs now. Nigel is all over the place saying some amazing things. But if they go that one step further and they take on board the people that the ordinary public desperately want them to take on board, then I think it would be a massive boon for them. It would be a massive gain. And I would encourage, standing from the sidelines as I am doing, because I'm not involved with reform, but I would encourage Nigel to do that wholeheartedly. I think it's an important time. I think it's an incredibly important decision. And if he doesn't make it now and he doesn't make the right decision, Dan, then he's going to find himself in trouble.
Well, I actually agree with you, Philip, but I would say the problem is the decision has been made, and the decision has been made to go another way. And why I think it's a mistake is you're never going to win. I mean, you've already got the mainstream media saying, Nigel, you've never been in government before, but you're the one that ruined the country. And by the way, you also caused the riots, or so-called riots, after the Southport Massacre. It's all your fault. They're already saying that. So he's not going to win. But I think he's made the decision. And I saw you were also very disappointed with Nigel's rhetoric in terms of going against the concept of mass deportations, which is something that Trump has obviously spoken about and is actually becoming a mainstream political policy across continental Europe at the moment. But Nigel has said, nope, it's impractical.
Yeah, I think just to clarify what I meant there, Dan, because I think you're absolutely right. Yes, the decision has been made, but what I'm interested in here is breaking paradigms, okay? And what Nigel could do is listen to the people, listen to the general public, and say, I'm actually going to make a U-turn on this, and I'm going to do it because I was wrong. Okay, U-turns are sometimes good. If you're heading towards a brick wall, then a U-turn is the best thing you can possibly do. Okay, I think Nigel is heading towards a brick wall with this. Okay, he's made the decision. He's made the wrong decision, but he could reverse it. He could bring those two people back on board, and they would be happy to be there.
Yes, he could actually. And the thing is, if you look at the Trump comparison, and remember, Nigel is so inspired by Donald Trump, and he loves all of the people who are part of the MAGA movement in the US. He's mates with Carrie Lake. So I find it really annoying, actually, that he's saying that our version of Carrie Lake, I mean, Katie Hopkins is very, very similar to Carrie Lake. When you look at their background, part of the mainstream media, had a big political awakening, effectively cancelled from the establishment. Now, I find it really annoying that he's saying, well, I completely support this person in America to be a Trump supporter, but in the UK, I don't want you because you're never going to be accepted by the British Bashing Corporation or Sly News.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, it's working along their rules. It's adhering to their principles. And what reform is all about, or what I assume reform is all about, and what everybody thinks reform is all about, is breaking the rules. It's about rebellion. It's about doing things differently. I think just on a very basic level, I think this is really important, right? On a very basic level, we're talking about Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins here. Let's just stick with those for the time being, right? Yes. You've got two incredibly intelligent people. They're not just people who can talk to the general public in a really effective way. They're also incredibly clear-sighted and absolutely spot on when it comes to culture, when it comes to politics, when it comes to society. Okay, so it isn't just a question of being populist and being down with the people and saying the right things. It's actually thinking forward. And this is my second point, okay? I'm a critical friend of reform. I support reform, but I would like to see more by way of policy, okay? By way of ideas. And I think Katie and Tommy would be the ideal people, as well as Westminster think tanks and all the rest of it, okay? But those kind of people would be the right people to pitch in the right ideas, because they're so clear-sighted. They know exactly what people want, and they know exactly what people think. So for me, that is a key thing. Yes, you're right. I was disappointed with the tone and content of Nigel's interview last week, I think it was, wasn't it, with Stephen Edgington?
With GB News,
This is a no-brainer for me. Culture is important. Demographics are extremely important. If we've got people coming over here breaking the law, then they need to go back. If we've got illegal immigrants coming over here, then they just need to go back straight away. It's the simplest thing imaginable, and yet Nigel seems to be sliding towards the middle ground with all of this stuff, which is very worrying indeed, because that unique voice, that unique position, that sense of we're going to change politics is going to go if we're not very careful. Now, he's already made the wrong decision, you've just said, and I wholeheartedly agree. But let him do a Trump. Let's just say, well, I'm going to change it. So what? I'm going to change it. It was the wrong decision. I'm going to change it. If he did that, right, he's in a unique position. If he did that, people would love him for it. Okay. Right. And that groundswell of support that reform have, that he has himself personally will transform, will go to the next level, and so many more people will be on board. They will be a serious electoral force if he does that. All it is saying, I'm going to change my mind because I've got the guts to change my mind. Unfortunately, as you and I know, he's probably not going to do that.
Well, no, but the only thing that makes me think there's a small chance he might is, Philip, I am now convinced, and I'm usually right when it comes to the Conservative membership, Robert Jenrick is the next leader of the Conservative Party. I just do not think Kemi Badenoch, who will likely be up against him in the final two, has a hope. Now, Robert Jenrick is stealing a lot of Nigel's ideas, and he is in some ways trying to outmaneuver Nigel. So I think actually that might be one reason why it's going to be important for Reform UK to actually not try and go to the centre ground, because weirdly there might be this battle with our outflanked on the right by a Robert Jenrick Conservative Party.
Yes, it's amazing to think, isn't it, that that Reform could be outflanked on the right by the Tory party that have been responsible for the last 14 years.
Oh, yeah.
And
it will all be rhetoric. It will all be rhetoric.
Of mass immigration that nobody voted for. I mean, I spoke about this on a couple of times about Robert Jenrick. I think he said this in the Mail, didn't he? And he was talking about, mass immigration might be a problem. You know, a problem to the culture. And so...
No sugar, Sherlock.
I always
We've been telling you for 14 years.
Yeah, I always feel with the Conservative Party like I'm in a kind of an abusive, narcissistic relationship with them, and they're gaslighting me totally. You know, yes, I'm glad you've woken up to the fact that mass immigration might be a problem for the culture, but maybe you should have been talking about this. You should have been talking about this 15 years ago.
If we get back together, right, I promise I won't cheat on you, Philip. It's like that, isn't it? Well, I'm never going to trust you again, even if I think you're saying all the right things, Robert. That's where I stand. But look, Labour Party conference today, and what I want to do is something that the mainstream media won't. I want to decode the two keynote speeches given by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I've got the perfect person to do it, Philip Kiszely from the New Culture Forum. And listen to this. I think what's really important is also what wasn't said. So in Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer's keynote addresses today to the Labour Party conference, there was not one reference to the threat, the imminent threat facing this country of extreme Islam, both in terms of terror and culture. But what they were happy to talk a lot about were those terrible so-called far-right rioters after the Southport Massacre. So we're going to decode this with Philip Kiszely, but let's look first at Yvette Cooper.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
But Philip Kiszely isn't exactly what she's doing there, trying to conflate the people who had genuine concerns after Southport with that tiny, tiny, tiny group of people who were violent, which is, by the way, the exact opposite thing that the Labour Party always tells us not to do after an Islamist terror attack, where we're not meant to make any wider judgments about Muslim people.
These people turn context on and off at will. Okay. And I was just looking at that footage and I was quite frightened. This was Mummy Knows Best on steroids. It was a performance, and you could tell that she didn't mean a word of it. Okay. It was just there. It was shouting for the sake of shouting. It was throwing red meat to an audience that desperately wanted to hear it. She is talking about a group of people, and as you say, she's conflating a group of people with a tiny, tiny minority of of thugs. And you know, I'm not condoning violence, and I'm certainly not condoning setting fire to things or anything like that. But what I'm talking about, okay, and what she's talking about, is a group of people who have constantly been lied to for decade upon decade, a group of people who do not have a voice, a group of people who are now second-class citizens, not only with policing, but two-tier everything, with education, with social cultural services, with just being in and around the city and the town centres. They are second-class citizens now. Let's not forget, also, I don't know whether viewers have seen this, but there was a TED talk today from a woman in Nottingham. I don't know whether you've seen this, Dan.
No, I haven't.
But she was talking about education, and she was talking about ethnically cleansing the curriculum of white males. Okay, so this is a similar kind of thing. On the one hand, Yvette Cooper can talk about the deplorable white people, but she will not mention the other side of the coin, which is overt racism, which is happening in terms of violence, but also cultural violence, cultural racism, which is expunging a certain kind of person from public and actually private life.
No, indeed. There was more from Yvette Cooper, though, that I want you to decode. Let's have a look.
I'll be honest, I've been shocked by the response from some of those in political parties on the right who once claimed to care about law and order. After rioters attacked the police, they should have given full-throated backing to our brave officers. Instead, too often we've seen them undermine the integrity and authority of the police, even making excuses for the mob. If you remember back in the run-up to Armistice Day last year, disgraceful slurs that were made against the police, which made it harder for them to do their job that day, were treated as a sacking offence for a Tory Home Secretary. A year on, those same slurs have become an article of faith for every Tory leadership contender. It is shameful what that party has become. So the Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers, undermining respect for the rule of law, trying to fracture the very bonds that keep communities safe.
Okay, Philip, a lot to go at there. What does she mean?
I'm speechless.
Me too, and that never happens.
Can we just think about what she said there, and again how she said it? It was so performative. You know, she's speaking to a bunch of people who desperately want to hear exactly what she's saying. But actually, what she's talking about there, Dan, she is describing precisely what's been happening in the institutions, what's been happening in government, what's been happening to the judiciary, what's been happening in the police service, and it is her kind of people. It is the identitarians, it is the Labour supporters and the Labour MPs who have been wrecking communities. How have they been wrecking communities? It all comes back down to mass immigration, doesn't it? They've opened the floodgates and they've allowed anybody to come in. And when communities that aren't actually that robust because they're poor, when they have to deal with this kind of stuff, that's when things break down. Okay, and it is her ethos, it is the ethos of the government. They are doing what they're accusing other people of doing. It's this same narcissistic gaslighting thing. My concern is that this is going to go into overdrive even more than it is now. What did we have? 1.2 million gross last year. Okay, we're going to have much more this year. Okay, and we're going to be even more unable to complain about it because censorship and authoritarian rule of law is they're just going to be imposing those things on people like you and me, on the ordinary people, especially in the streets who just want change. It's going to be a very, very difficult time. And I worry so much about what's going to happen to this country over the next 2 or 3 years. And what makes me worry, it's not people without a voice and people who are marching in the streets. Okay, fair enough. It's people like her telling blatant lies, because there comes a point for ordinary people when they will just not accept any more these Orwellian blatant lies.
I know we thought things were bad under the Conservatives, but this is on a whole other level now. So following Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, was the Prime Minister, Free Gear Care, Slippery Starmer, Scrounger Starmer, however you want to call him these days. Let's watch.
To say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different. I say, not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win, because the British values we stand for, not just the rule of law, but a love for this country and our neighbours, the respect for difference under the same flag, that is stronger than bricks, and you know it. It's what you cannot stand about our country, our reasonable, tolerant country, but it's absolutely who we are.
And what's he talking about there, Philip Kiszely? Because, I'm sorry, none of the issues that have been raised by the vast bulk of people following the Southport Massacre or before have anything to do with the colour of anyone's skin. It's actually been about the changes to the country, the complete lack of infrastructure for this huge invasion, and critically, the values that some of these people have coming into the country where they quite clearly hate what it means to be English, what it means to live here, what it means to be part of a liberal, tolerant society. And yes, I do include extreme Islam in that, by the way, that wants to throw someone like me as a gay man off the top of a building. And that is no exaggeration, because that is what is taught in a lot of the mosques in East London. Now, I'm sorry, I don't believe that does make me someone who's going against the fabric of what it means to be English.
No, it's part of. It's really interesting listening to him talk there, and I've listened to that a few times. There's been a violence done to the culture over the last few years, and there's a sense that now we're in a period where people, in a way, just don't take anything these people say seriously, because, as I said before, it's lies that are coming out of their mouths. So on the one hand, okay, we have Islamist extremism. We have young men from very hostile cultures coming into this country, and we are not allowed to critique any of it. Okay, we're not even allowed to acknowledge it's happening. We can't even look at stats, for example, that tell us that there are sexual assaults going on in London, particularly on the public transport system. We don't know who's doing them. We know they're men, and we know that there are plenty of them going on. They've gone through the roof since 2020, but we don't have any more detail than that. They will not give us a demographic breakdown, and we know why that's the case. Okay, so we are not allowed to talk about or criticize any other culture. In fact, we have to celebrate every other culture. That's all we do. We celebrate every other culture. We celebrate diversity. We celebrate inclusion, apart from the inclusion of the British culture. All we do is deconstruct the British culture. Children are brainwashed into thinking that their history is terrible, that they are terrible because of the color of their white skin, that they need to repent somehow and make reparations. And we're talking primarily here about poor people. Poor people somehow need to make reparations. So that's where we are at the moment. And all the Prime Minister, my God, he's the Prime Minister, all the Prime Minister is doing there is saying, look, you're rubbish. We're not listening to you. We don't care about what you think. We don't care about any of your concerns. We don't care about British culture. We are as quickly as possible deconstructing it. And we've had this intellectual, social, cultural deconstruction, and we are heading for crisis. We are heading for the brick wall. Well, you could say the planes crashed into the mountain anyway.
Oh,
and
yes, I think we're there.
the Labour government is accelerating that process in a far greater way than even I thought they would do.
Totally. And they hid it from us too. He wasn't done there. Philip, more from Starmer.
But conference, whatever anyone thinks about immigration, I will never accept the argument made not just by the usual suspects, but by people who should have known better, who said that millions of people concerned about immigration are one and the same thing as the people who smashed up businesses, who targeted mosques, attempted to burn refugees, scrawled racist graffiti over walls, Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, attacked NHS nurses, and told people with different coloured skin, people who contribute here, people who grew up here, that they should go home. No.
But Philip Kiszely, what he is doing there, yet again, is directly linking the issue of immigration to the so-called riots. He is the one that is refusing to separate the two things. And he is the one that's making anyone who feels like they do have concerns about mass immigration, like he's calling them some sort of racist.
Yeah, it's textbook manipulation, and it's quite worrying to look at it as we're looking at the clips bit by bit. I find myself very alarmed, and I find myself alarmed at the performativity of it all as well. You need someone to train him properly to kind of put these points across. But it makes me think. He's talking about Nazi salutes at the cenotaph. Okay. One thing he's not talking about, and you probably know what I'm going to say here, are the Saturday hate marches every week, where we're seeing
not even
the most appalling anti-Semitism from, it has to be said, from Islamic communities, from Islamist extremists in particular, but also from the Corbynist left of his party, and we are seeing anti-Semitism from his own MPs. So there is a sense that if you're going to say there is a problem about racism in this country, right, there's a very clear and obvious problem, and that's anti-Semitism, because it's riddled through the institutions.
Right.
Okay, the intelligentsia, who we started this conversation talking about, the intelligentsia have changed anti-Semitism to anti-Zionism, and they have built so many concepts and theories around it, and they've made it kind of almost respectable among that group of people. So that's what we've really got to worry about, because there's real power behind it. What do we have? That's never going to be addressed. That's never going to be addressed, because there's no reason for him to address it. The more that carries on, the more powerful the Labour Party and he will be. And he's in this terrible situation now where he has to pay lip service to it. Because if he doesn't, the extremists will leave his party and join the Gaza alliance. Okay, so if we are talking about racism and we do want to be really, really honest about this, then yes, we've got to talk about Corbyn and his mates, and we've got to think about, why is there a Gaza alliance, for God's sake, in British Parliament? And the reason is because they are all massively anti-Semitic, they hate the West, and they hate Britain.
Very good point. Very, very important point. Look, breaking right now, as if you thought life under slippery Starmer in dystopian Britain couldn't become any more miserable, he's about to go nanny state on speed, not content with banning smoking outside. Starmer is planning to put the final nail in the coffin, I believe, to our great pub trade by forcing our public houses to call last orders early. The Daily Telegraph says this is a new Labour, nanny, state, blow. I'll say, what does Nigel Farage think about it? 50 pubs closed every month in the first half of this year. Labour's war on landlords will finish off the rest if Starmer isn't stopped. And what about one of the country's best known landlords, my friend Adam Brooks? He writes, and now these authoritarian lunatics are coming to finish off the pubs. You'll do as they say, no having fun or bad habits. Well done, Labour voters. And seriously, Philip Kiszely from the New Culture Forum, I am so despondent and desolate about this decision because, number one, do you not realise the pub closing time is already far too early? And number two, just F off out of my life. What are they doing and why are they destroying a trade and a business that has already had an almost impossible past 5 years after the lunacy that they had to deal with during the COVID pandemic?
There's something about going to a pub, sitting down with a pint, and it needs to be a pint, and chatting. There's something that's, for me, eminently civilized about that. You can discuss things, you can resolve things, you can think about the culture, you can exchange. It seems to me that, one, they just want to stop us having fun because they're miserable, and that's that's as far as it goes on that level. But the other level is they just want to stop us talking. They want to stop us gathering, because half the time, when I don't know what you're like, but when I'm in the pub and I frequent the Westminster Arms and places like that, all the talk is about politics, So there's something there about, it's a soft way of making life just that little bit more miserable. It's a way of just disconnecting us that little bit more from our friends. And this idea of, now is it a 3/4 pint rather than a pint that they're trying to that seems to have fallen flat on its face? A 3/4 pint? No, I won't have that. I'll die before I drink a 3/4 pint. It's just ludicrous. But it's one of those things, Dan, very, very quickly, that it's an overreach. Okay, It's this nanny state thing. It's what I call mummy knows best. Okay, it's such an overreach that, in a way, I want them to do much more of it. And I feel guilty about enjoying myself watching them fall flat on their faces, because I know that the issues are so serious. They're freezing grannies. They're getting in bed with the unions. They're bowing to Islam. And now, for God's sake, they're trying to take our pint away. So let them do it. Let them do all of these crazy things. They'll come a cropper sooner rather than later. But we must remember the issues are so damn serious.
They are indeed. And these are all distractions and diversions. And I will point out, Philip, who is the pub most connected with? Usually the white working classes. And obviously not entirely. And I actually think our pub culture is one of our great unifiers, and maybe one of the issues with the fact that Islam doesn't tend to integrate into society so much is because they don't drink, and we do have this pub culture. But I would say it just always feels like under this new government, it is the white working classes who are targeted time and again.
Yes, it's on every level. So I mean, I was quite staggered at this ridiculous piece of kind of foolishness. But you just see it in every kind of way, and it's, as I always say, this isn't just about two-tier policing. It's about two-tier everything. And our experience of life in this country is slowly being removed from what is an historical cultural experience of life, that continuity from our parents. There's something really special about, going to the pub for the first time with your dad when you're 18, for example. There's something culturally that really speaks to us about that. And it feels as though as I said before, they're trying to deconstruct our culture and replace it with something else. Now, you could argue it's globalist and it's and it's bland and it's anonymous and all of those things. But I think you're right, Dan. I think it's more than that. I think there is a particularly large and growing demographic in this country that dislikes all of these things that are connected, because they don't participate in them, connected with one, white working class men, but also the historic continuity of the culture and what the left and the Islamists in bed together. My God, that's an unholy alliance that is going to end in tears. But what they want is to take these things away from us. But it's taking our identity away from us. The Great British Pub is very much part of the British identity, and it must continue.
It really must. It really must. But unfortunately, I think it is under serious threat. Philip Kiszely, what an absolute pleasure it has been to have you back on Outspoken. One of the only sane voices, it seems, in academia these days, and also a fellow at the brilliant New Culture Forum. Thank you so much, Philip. Speak soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Now stand by, because Angela Levin is up in just 1 minute time, and we're going to show you the insanity of Prince Harry, who has gone all Meghan Markle, even though he doesn't have Meghan Markle by his side, in New York. And what's going on with her calling in sick to these events, by the way. Angela Levin with all of the news in 1 minute. But first, it's the best time of year. Football is back, so we're talking Premier League in the UK, in the US, NFL Sundays, and college football Saturdays. With that, of course, comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups. This is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your telly, and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy that gets ridiculed in the group chat. So listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench. Because let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine. And that's why I want to tell you today about Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue era nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster. With precise trimming capabilities, it's reliant, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants to surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day, so the Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials, because today it comes with 2 completely free gifts. This is so cool. The Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. I'm one of them. And get ready for kickoff by heading over to www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken for 20% off, and totally free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So 20% off, free shipping. You just have to use the code Outspoken at checkout at www.manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. But now back to the show, and it's time for our Royal Mastermind. And breaking right now, Prince Harry is in New York without Meghan Markle, but it seems like the woke mind virus has got into his head. Lots of bizarre stuff going on, including PR from People magazine, reported by the Daily Mail, that Prince Harry FaceTimed Meghan Markle, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet before taking to the stage with Diana Award winners in New York. Angela Levin, our Royal Mastermind, Prince Harry's biographer, here to talk through all of this. Angela, first up, I wanted to talk specifically about that leak to People magazine, because a lot of folk are saying, oh, there's some issues with Harry and Meghan because she didn't show up to the Kevin Costner event over the weekend. There's been all of the negative press surrounding the Hollywood Reporter expose. So it seems like a very odd leak, doesn't it, to People magazine saying, oh, but don't worry, Harry might be in New York alone, but he's still calling Meghan. So are we really meant to believe that everything's hunky-dory, totally fine?
No, it's a repeat, actually, very similar to when when Harry wanted to sort of come back to London, and he wanted a home and he wanted to make friends with his family, and that's what he really needed so badly. And then up it came. Harry is incredibly happy where he is. He's got loads of new friends and he loves being with his children and everything's, he couldn't be happier, and he doesn't want to do anything for the royal family that involves work. So this was a sort of absolute opposite of what he gave the inclination that that's what he wanted. And now they're doing it again. And as it's people, they're, I think, still used by Meghan and Harry, friends, to say what they'd like to think and make it all positive and everything's honky-dory. But Harry said something that she wasn't feeling well and was screaming in the night. So you have to think, was that pain or was that telling him off because people have criticised her beyond what she ever thought would ever happen? We'll get on to that in a minute, won't we? But I mean, it's just calling her all sorts of nasty things.
Screaming in the night, it's odd, isn't it?
I think that's why I've always thought that she would never do anything political wherever she is, because, you know, they have to have skins of as thick as you can imagine. And she's so sensitive to anyone saying anything critical about her that she couldn't manage it. I mean, you need a politician who can brush those things away, but she can't. I mean, I think she finds it dreadful, and she can't understand it because she thinks she's the global most wonderful woman, and she just can't take it that people don't actually agree with her.
No, indeed. And this is arguably the worst period of her career, and she's had some pretty bad ones. What is odd, though, Angela, is that Harry has gone to New York, but he used to be, I mean, you knew him, you spent all of this time with him, he used to be a plain-speaking, ordinary guy. And I want you to analyze a few of his comments, but it feels like he's been injected by Meghan's woke mumbo-jumbo. It's like he's got the woke mind virus running through him. People keep describing what he's saying as a word salad, where he actually says a lot, but doesn't actually mean anything. So I want to show you a couple of examples. This is one of the first ones. When he starts asking a group of youngsters about what the Jamaican government is doing.
Rosina, the government's recognised you, right? The Jamaican government? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is because amongst how many thousands of, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Almost 100,000 now. We've been on for 25 years. 25
years. So we have an army of activists of almost about 100,000. And the reason I bring that up is because they are scattered all across the world in so many different countries. And again, the reason why I bring that up is because surely one of the solutions here is for governments to implement or at least offer or find people, young people like yourselves, and bring them into decision-making, policy-making situations. Right, before the problems exist, and we're very, very good at creating problems for ourselves to try and solve. But surely, by bringing young people in at the early stages for those solutions, surely that is where the difference is going to be made. And why is that not happening?
Angela, make it make sense. What the hell is he even talking about? I mean, it's just mumbo jumbo.
What I'm thinking is that he has been so crushed by Meghan. He's learnt he has to do what he's told, to stand where she wants him, and to let her speak rather than him. And he's come away without her, and he's lost. He doesn't know how to manage. When he was with me, he spoke naturally very, very well, and he could be extremely funny, and it was all off his brain straight away. But this is that you can see he's really, really nervous and hasn't done his research. I mean, you forget how much effort you have to put into speeches. You can't just go in there and talk unless you're extraordinarily clever. And most people know that, but it doesn't sound like it when it happens. But I just think he's in a muddle before he starts. So he keeps adding words to the sentences, and he's not actually saying anything nothing at all. I mean, I think when you see that, you realise how damaged he is now. It's quite upsetting to see, frankly.
Yeah, actually, I really felt that, Angela, watching this next little part, because I think you're completely right. He's under-researched, underdone, but it's also almost like he doesn't want to be there. Watch this.
The reason why I wanted to go last is because these guys are the ones that give me hope. I've said it years ago, and I'll say it again. The younger generation are not putting too much pressure on you guys. You are what give me hope. The courage that you have gives me hope, because every single one of us need courage in order to really move the dial and create positive change in today's world, probably more so now than ever. So thank you to you guys for giving me and probably a lot of other people in this room hope. And now we need to listen, constantly listen, and then act on the advice and the vision that you have, because otherwise it's your future that's being stolen from you, and that is unacceptable.
Amazing. Thank you. Amazing.
I mean, such muted applause because his heart wasn't in it. His heart wasn't in it.
It's absolutely fascinating, because if you take what he's saying over to himself, you see how upset he is and how he needs hope for the future and how he has to be very, very brave to do it. And what's very interesting is that when he talked to military people who had been damaged emotionally, and he would actually work out how he could talk to them so that they were all right. And the first question I asked him when I went to see him at the palace was that, did he use his work to help him handle his own mental problems? And if you think that was 2017, so a lot has happened since then, but I had the courage to ask that. I thought we'd either have that excellent conversation or he'd throw me out. So I tried to get the excellent conversation. And he sort of said to me, "Oh, that's a question." And it was absolutely silent. It seemed like 10 hours, but I think it was about a minute. And he said to me, "You know, you're absolutely right. It helps me a lot. And I think this is identity. This identity is exactly what he's doing there. He's helping himself dramatically to try and get over this difficult time. It could be about his family, it could be about Meghan, it could be indeed about the world, but I think it's definitely asking people to help him, to give him ideas that will help him manage it. That too is very interesting. I always think it's very interesting that he calls, I think I'm quite old-fashioned on this, he calls women guys. I think it's a bit odd, but I know people do that. But we're not guys, we're girls. So that's just by the way.
It's interesting you speak about the mental health issue, because actually on this trip, Angela, he has said that we should call it mental fitness, not mental health. And that annoys me, because why does it matter what you call it?
No, it doesn't matter at all. And everybody thinks about it, about mental health. I mean, mental fitness doesn't work because, it doesn't work at all. And I think that he just wanted to do something himself, name something, that at least he's done something. I think it's that desperation that he's so behind Meghan that any little thing he can think of, oh, we could call it this, will actually make him feel a little bit better. He's obviously incredibly unhappy.
Yeah, it gives him something, doesn't it? There was a speech at the anti-landmine event, the Hallow Trust. Now, this was obviously a big thing for Princess Diana. This speech was scripted, Angela, so he was more researched, he was more together. I don't know if he wrote it himself. But I had one issue with the speech, Angela. I want to play you just a little clip from it, because he's talking again about the perils of colonization. And it's just such a difficult, slippery slope for a member of the British royal family to be going down that path. But let's have a watch and I'll get you to react off the bat.
Angola has brought a collaborative spirit and relentless determination to this endeavour. Demining on such a monumental scale is a challenge for any country, let alone one that has emerged from centuries of colonialism and decades of civil war. Yet Angola, facing a myriad of urgent challenges, remains steadfast in this mission.
You know, colonialism, according to Prince Harry there, is a bad thing. Angela, now he's a member of the British royal family. This is just, he just has to be so careful because he doesn't know what he's opening up.
Yes, it's very difficult. He really mustn't take the role of anybody within the royal family because that can affect the monarchy. Maybe that's what he wants to do.
Maybe.
But he can't express what should be done on behalf of the royal family. And therefore, he has no power. And whatever he says doesn't have to happen. It's completely out of it, but it can damage. And I think that that together with the phony royal trips abroad, I think that the royal family has to do something about it. Never mind about lots of things, but you can't have someone who hasn't got the okay on talking like that.
No, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Now, you know, his security thing is such a big issue to him. And last time in New York, there were all of those fake claims about a car chase, which just simply couldn't have happened in Manhattan. Anyone who's been to Manhattan for 5 minutes knows it's impossible. But this time, Angela, without Meghan by his side, there was a serious security operation going on. It's been captured on camera, so let's have a look. They shut the road down.
Yeah, they shut the road down and he was coming out of a garage. That's what we saw. And I mean, to do that, there was about 6 or 8 of these tough guys who were, you know, just right for him. But I think they did it because he was very, very neurotic about it.
Yes.
And I think he would be because he's scared. And but it was his fault, really, that what he wrote in Spare, that he talked about the number of Afghanistan people that he had shot or killed in one way or another. And that makes him more vulnerable. But I think if he's with Meghan, he feels that he's got to look after her. So he doesn't so much worry about himself. But now he's on his own. He feels that he can't not go home. So he must be super looked after.
Now, there's lots of other issues with this trip, Angela. Harry is yet again sidling up to the Democrats and getting political. Niall Gardner of the Heritage Foundation, very concerned about this, pointing out that Harry is to join Bill Clinton to discuss global challenges, including climate change, in a session called Everything Everywhere All at Once at the Clinton Global Initiative annual meeting. Now, you're also concerned, aren't you, about how Harry is sort of riding roughshod over these regulations and rules that have been in place for a long time for the British royal family. And remember, he remains in the line of succession.
Yes. Well, it's appalling, really. The first notice, this is the same when something is said and then they absolutely do the opposite a few minutes later. And say, you know, they've made a big mistake. But first of all, it was that he had joined the First Lady in America, and they were going to encourage people to vote. So that's obviously they're not going to ask people to vote of the other side. They want people who are, you know, already there. and to keep going. So that was shocking. But now it is that he is going to work with the minister there, with Biden there, Joe Biden, and he's going to get involved in that way. Well, he just cannot. So the next thing was, story 3 was that it came out that it wasn't Meghan or Harry who was doing this. It was the Archwell people who worked there. They'd come up with this idea. They are doing it. But, 5 minutes earlier, Harry was going to work with the president. Now he had nothing to do with it. But, they've done that on their own. Well, actually, you'd have to be daft if you believe that, because the Archwell Foundation is them.
It's them.
And if you've
Literally
got
them.
somebody like Meghan who's running it, people would not do something without discussing it with her. So they think that we're stupid, or they don't want to know what we think. But this is the muddle that you get into, so you don't really know what's going on or what they're doing. But here's a member of the royal family. He uses his name, and he cannot do that. They absolutely cannot do that. They have to decide whether they want to keep the title or not. And this is where I said just before about Meghan getting into politics. She doesn't want to be criticised, and that will fortunately keep her away. She can tell everybody else what to do, but she won't get involved with herself doing things.
Now, Angela, you say that you can't trust a word these two say, and I agree with you. So do we actually believe that Meghan called in sick to this Kevin Costner charity event, or was this because the damning Hollywood Reporter takedown had come out and she didn't want to risk being booed given there were members of the public there? I mean, there were lots of A-listers at this event: Jeff Bridges, Rob Lowe, Pink. Meghan was there last year, but Harry claims now that she was sick.
Yeah, well, she might have been sick of what was going on in the world. There's a different meaning to the word sick. So
that's true.
We could say that, but probably not. I mean, it would be extremely humiliating for her to get there with people calling her all sorts of names, and that she's a nasty person and treats everybody very badly. I don't think... I agree that it's very, very difficult to go there. You just want to hide away, whoever you are. So I would find that that's quite possibly what she wanted to do, not to be there. Because if people started asking her, what does she feel about all the criticisms of her lately? Who wants to answer that? It's a bit like the Labour Party, isn't it? They're all sort of desperate to get away from the criticisms. You don't want to mention them. They don't happen. They don't exist. And I think that's why. But I think for anybody to be so badly attacked by magazines, people, I think that, it's best if she stayed away. She'll come out with something any time now, because it'll die off. And she'll come up with what she's doing in the future, which might not take place.
Look, Angela Levin, stand by, please. Great stuff, but we have so much more royal news for you coming up in the Uncancelled After Show, including, by the way, the first look at a brand new, never-before-seen interview where Meghan is directly asked about her suicide attempt within the royal family. Her response will shock you, so you want to come and join Angela and I for this. It's very important to me that we have a safe space not patrolled by big tech, because under big tech giants, control and censorship runs incredibly deep. So that's why I have www.outspoken.live. It's our membership section where you get half an hour of extra content every single weekday. So what we do at this stage is we come off YouTube, we come off Rumble, we move to our own platform to continue the conversation with Angela in the Uncancelled After Show. I would love you to register at www.outspoken.live. Register, give us your details. Then we just need you to pay £5 a month and you get that 30 minutes of extra content every single weekday. That funding also allows me to continue, stay independent, and making Outspoken, which I hope you'll agree in these chilling times is an important thing. We are back live tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now on YouTube and Rumble. I promise to keep fighting for you, but I hope to see you on the after show in just one moment with Angela Levin.